It is now my pleasure to call this debate to order. The resolution on the table tonight is resolved. America needs the changes President Trump and his administration promise. I now call this debate to order, and I am looking for a first speech in the affirmative. For that, I would like to go to Tom. Tom, please unmute yourself. You have 4 minutes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, first of all, in affirming this, supporting the policy does not necessarily mean you are pro-Trump. Now, I'm going to address two particular policies in my first 4 minutes: deportation policy and government cuts. I am willing to address other aspects as requested. Would start off by saying in deportation policy, of course, America is a nation of immigrants, legal immigrants. This is defined in 8 USC codes, United States Code 1324, 1325, et cetera, et cetera. President Trump and Tom Homan want to deport illegals who have committed additional crimes. And please don't call them undocumented. The illegals have plenty of documents. They have the documents they keep from their home country. They have expired visas. They have forged documents. And for example, the illegals staying at the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City have been given additional documents to document that they live at the hotel. Now, deporting illegals who are rapists and murderers and committed other crimes should not be controversial. But for some reason, the Dems refuse to turn over these illegals. So when ICE goes out looking for the rapists and the murderers and the other secondary criminals, they're going to areas where there are a lot of illegals. So they end up rounding up not only the bad illegals, but also the good illegals. And I'm defining good illegal as the ones who clean and care for us, take care of our lawns, and do all the work that a lot of us refuse to do and won't do. And again, because America is a nation of immigrants, I think even those of us who support deporting illegals have a certain empathy for the other ones. Now, it's acknowledged there are at least 300,000 what I would call double criminals. They entered the country illegally and they have committed other crimes. For example, MS-13 shouldn't require any justification. We need to deport the bad ones to keep us safe. If the Dems would turn over these 300,000 people, then we wouldn't have to go after the ones that take care of us. Topic 2, the federal budget and government cuts. Our federal budget's about $7 trillion a year, and I actually have a good breakdown if anyone's interested. We spend about $1 trillion of that in interest on the debt. We take in about $4 trillion a year in taxes and borrow the rest. Now, raising taxes to pay off the debt traditionally, instead of paying off debt, has gone to new spending because politicians from all across the board love spending. Politicians don't like to cut outdated departments and agencies. Now, putting modern monetary theory aside, we've really got to cut government spending, zero the deficit, and start paying off the debt. Now, every administration since Reagan and probably before, and both parties, has identified numerous places to cut, both expenses, processes, and regulations. And yet, for reasons we could discuss at a different discussion, a few regulations have been cut, but government continues to grow and grow. The process has failed, and there is a process. It has totally failed. The American people get it, and the Congress has demurred to DOGE. My final point is, while Trump and DOGE are scary, we need to cut the budget and governmental control over our lives, and this seems to be the only real world way it's going to happen. Madam Chair, I will return the time to you.
Perfect. You had 30 seconds just about then. Okay. Thank you to our speaker. I now am looking for questions of curiosity. For our first question, I will go to Atul. Please unmute and direct your question to me, please.
Hello, Madam Chair. I would like to ask the gentleman or the speaker is, the last time we did balanced budget was during Democratic President Clinton. And if Republican would have not given the tax cuts, we would have like our debt would have been zero in 10 years. What are the policies which we are hearing right now from the current administration, which he thinks or Speaker thinks that will reduce the deficit?
To our
There
speaker,
are a lot. Oh, I'm sorry.
please go ahead.
The gentleman asks very good questions. There's a list we all know about. There are departments and agencies that are outdated. There are inefficiencies. There are U.S. tax dollars are going, to LGBTQ operas in Colombia and Sesame Street overseas. For that matter, the whole Corporation Public Broadcasting, which was critical 50 years ago, now with the internet is just no longer needed. We're going to have to address some of the big items in the tent: Medicare, Social Security, and even I'm a Navy commander, retired, and even the Department of Defense. And I was pleasantly surprised and a little shocked that DOGE is actually at the Pentagon making cuts also. Do I have an exact? I have a decent laundry list. I spent from 2004 to 2021 in something called continuity. We're the ultimate emergency managers who, when the world was coming to an end, we make things happen. In 2004, 2005, we identified 8 national essential functions, approximately 80 priority mission essential functions, and thousands of mission essential functions for the federal government. Those should not be an issue because they are necessary for providing. The government's job is to protect the citizens, his rights, and his property. But there's just a lot of, people were complaining that that Musk wanted 5 bullets of what civil servants did last week. If you can't come up with 5 bullets on what you did last week and how it impacted national security or how it made, teaching better, then maybe your job shouldn't exist. Now,
Tom,
I'm a second generation.
Last thought. Let's go on to some other questions. Thank you so much. I want to go.
Look, I have grown up in government. My mother's a retired GS-15. I'm a retired commander, a retired 15, and a federal emergency manager and defense contractor. Everyone who's worked with Uncle Sam has seen tons of waste and abuse. That's not even fraudulent because you have to do the waste and abuse to keep in the law. And I can go over that at another time.
Appreciate that. And I will try to keep us to about a minute for each question. So we'll do 2 more questions for the speaker. Catherine, followed by Donna. Catherine, please unmute and direct your question to me.
Yes, I would like to ask the speaker, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the speaker how eliminating entire departments or agencies is justified as a means of cutting so-called waste and abuse. I speak specifically, I'm a retired educator. I speak specifically of the Department of Education, which deals with a lot of disabled children's issues and poorer districts without the funding that wealthier ones have. How is eliminating something that impacts the children of the United States justified under this particular DOGE action?
Excellent question. My mother, like Jill Biden, had her doctorate education, and she started out with HEW. So obviously my mother's ghost would haunt me if I said all education issues are bad. But here's the fallacy I think people who agree with you on that are making. Just because you cut a function at the federal level does not mean you're against it. I'm all in favor of privatizing the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That does not mean I want to kill Big Bird. It means I want Big Bird to go to the private sector and make lots of money. Now, as education goes, if you look at the Department of Education's budget, much of it goes the plurality of it, to student loans, which the last administration thought should be grants. If they had gotten a reasonable education, for example, I took loans for my doctorate, and because I got a STEM public health degree, I was able to pay it back ahead of time. So as far as the educational programs, the president wants to push those back to the states and provide educational control to the states and localities. The president is not proposing, and I would be against this if he was, he's not proposing being anti-education or anti-academic. He's changing the focus, because we know in DC, you have a lot of bureaucratic levels and a lot of costs. Push that back to the states and localities and let them take care of it. Nobody is saying education is not important, because of course it is.
Thank you, Tom. And now to Donna.
Madam Chair, the speaker talked about cutting outdated agencies and other reasons why we needed to shut down certain functions. So I'm asking about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was created as a response to the 2008 financial crisis. So I guess we can't say that's quite outdated since it's pretty brand new. And it was intended to protect our consumers from predatory lending and other fraudulent banking practices, overcharges, etc. So on what basis does the speaker think that the CFPB should have been eliminated?
That is a great question. Protecting consumers is, as I said, the function of government is to protect the citizen, his rights, and his property. Protecting the consumers from usurious interest is a government function. But in response to the 2008 economic collapse, primarily from the housing agency, there were actually several federal agencies created. CFPB was one of them, but also the Federal Housing Finance Agency was created to help address a lot of the mortgage problems, which was a large part of the economic problem. And so several agencies were added to this. Now, the question is, since we're talking about legal protections, and don't talk about Pam Bondi, please, but legal protections probably belong at the legal office at the Department of Justice. So again, no one's saying get rid of this one particular agency. We're saying its functions are being duplicated by at least 4 different agencies, and let's cut that down to 1.
With that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked for this excellent first round of exchange. So I now am looking for a speech in the negative, for which I would like to go to Noreen. Do we have Noreen?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Let me preface this by saying it's difficult for me to take a stand either for or against the resolution. On the one hand, I believe there are several areas in need of reform within the federal government, and I'm totally in favor of making changes after thoroughly auditing what is and isn't working, making recommendations, and relying on Congress to take action when constitutionally required. On the other hand, with so many changes coming at us at a rapid speed and from multiple directions, how can one say whether or not the changes are needed? And the second part of the resolution, the administration promise, is totally unclear. Countless promises were made, some impossible to keep, and others taking time to efficiently implement. So it's simplistic to say the changes fulfill promises made on the campaign trail. My understanding is that one reason 55% of Americans sent Donald Trump to the White House was to make life better for working families. In addition to immigration, the primary concern seemed to be on the economy. Promises were made to lower gas, food, and housing prices, reduce household debt, reduce the unemployment rate and increase the labor force participation rate, and boost consumer confidence about their financial situation. With only 4 minutes to make my case, I'd like to focus on the changes pertaining to reducing the unemployment rate and increasing the labor force participation rate. Since taking office, the administration has eliminated thousands of federal jobs and fired tens of thousands of federal employees, regardless of why their positions were created and filled in the first place, the quality of their performance, or the impact on vital services provided to working families. And for the tens of thousands of workers forced to join the ranks of the unemployed, how does this make them better off economically? In addition to losing their source of income, their federal employee health benefit coverage will be terminated on the last day of the pay period they are separated. Although they can apply for temporary continuation of coverage, they will have to pay the government and employee share of the premium, and also a 2% fee for administrative costs, taking a further hit on their economic stability. And what do they do for income while searching for other jobs? They can certainly apply for unemployment insurance, which varies by state. The maximum weekly benefit amount here in Virginia, where I live, and 8% of the federal workforce lives, is $378 a week. And applicants may be disqualified by the Virginia Employment Commission deputy if they determine that they were let go in connection with their work, which is at the discretion of the employer, the administration, and DOJ. Unemployed federal workers may also apply for SNAP benefits and Medicaid. However, Trump supports a Republican-led proposal floated in the House, being voted on tonight, to trim $880 billion from Medicaid and
30
$200
seconds left.
from SNAP. Today, it was reported the Consumer Confidence Index registered the largest monthly decline since August of 2021. As views of the current labor market conditions weakened, pessimism about future employment prospects worsened and reached a 10-month high, and consumers became less optimistic about future income. On this one issue alone, I firmly disagree with the resolution. America does not need or voted for these changes.
Thank you to our speaker. I now will take questions of curiosity for our speaker. Mark.
Me? Wow, thanks. Does Madam Chair, does the speaker think that her method of analyzing first and then cutting has ever been used successfully anywhere in any organization?
Do I think that, or do I know that? Those are two different things. I can't point to any facts. I guess I operate the way I operated in my own business, is that before I go in and start making sweeping changes, I evaluate what's going on. And my belief is that when the administration started talking about cutting costs, that there were several people who took the position that I did, that meant they were going to look at what's effective in the government, what is wasting money, what is needed, and then make decisions based on that. But to go in and just take a sweeping, well, if you've only been in the job for 1 year, you're gone, out of here. We don't need you. And I would believe that if a position was created a year or 2 years ago, and a person was gone through a thorough interview process, there was a need for that position. And you don't just eliminate it because you go, okay, I'm going to take this chunk of people and I'm just going to get rid of all of them, regardless of why they're there and what they're doing. So
Thank you to our
I-
speaker. Yeah. Going on to another question, to Tom, our previous speaker.
Madam Chairwoman, I would ask the speaker if she would acknowledge that also federal civil servants were offered a 7-month essential a buyout where they get paid for 7 months while they look for a new job. Does the speaker acknowledge that the private sector nationwide has constantly been calling for more educated, competent employees, people to work for them? So there are jobs available. There might have to be some changes, but all of us who are older adults have made several career changes in our lives. I'll stick with those 2 points.
Yes,
Thank you for
Tom,
the
I
question.
do acknowledge that there was a buyout offered to several of the employees. And I would hope that they made some informed decisions about whether or not that was best for their career. I am in the career services industry. I've spent the last 30 years assisting people with making career transitions. The fact that they were offered some compensation, I certainly would acknowledge. I am concerned with the budget being up for renewal in March, whether or not there's going to be money available to pay these people. But my bigger concern is the sweeping firing of people simply because they were hired within the last 1 to 5 years, without any regard whatsoever to why they were hired, what the importance of their position is, what services that they're providing, and leaving them with no safety net, none at all. They were fired with nothing to fall back on, but $378 a week to live on if they indeed are eligible for unemployment. That's where
We're
my
offered the buyout also, though.
All right, that we won't be taking follow-up questions. We're going to keep moving along. So thank you to our questioners and to our speaker. Now I am looking for our second speech in the negative. And for that, I'd like to go to Joseph Mastriani. Joseph, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been a lot of the last election cycle about democracy, about threats to our democracy. Although we don't live in a pure democracy, we do have a democratic form of government. And in order to preserve this form of government that we have, if the electorate votes a certain way, then it is incumbent that we honor what the electorate chooses. Never before in my life, and perhaps everyone else here, have we experienced such a divide in our country as we have over the last 8 years. The divisions have presented two very different philosophical views towards how our federal government should be administered. At the core of Donald Trump's message is make America great again. What that message was met with extreme opposition by very powerful forces in Wall Street, in the media, and in the administrative state within the government. There has been an outsourcing of manufacturing jobs, of industry to developing countries that have benefited investors who were able to get in early on manufacturing in China or Mexico or many other countries throughout the world. And Donald Trump's message is we are losing our country's solvency if we're not making things here, and the middle class evaporates. Now, there's a lot of high-level econometric data and information that escapes most of the electorate. But Donald Trump created a movement and earned a tremendous amount of support, very rugged, thorough support, despite incredible opposition from people on the left and the institutions that the left was able to push against him. And yet still, that sentiment of support was maintained through 3 election cycles. And the policies of closing down the border, controlling immigration, bringing manufacturing back, cutting waste, growing the economy is what the people that voted for Trump want. And if we
30 seconds.
If we are going to maintain our democratic form of government, we have to recognize that there is a potential for populism and a populist to speak to the issues of the people in order to get power. And the idea that a strong America benefits the entire world, a strong and prosperous America benefits the entire world, is at the core of Donald Trump's message and is at the core of the belief of the people that voted for him.
Thank you to our speaker. I am now looking for questions of curiosity. And for our first one, I will go to Sandy.
I had to find unmute. Hi, Madam Speaker. No, you're Madam Chair.
I get mistaken for Nancy Pelosi a lot.
Madam Chair, I have a curiosity about the speaker's comments that to make our country strong, to have things manufactured here in the United States. I have a question about when these products and companies moved out of the United States. What year? My question is, this had started in the 1990s, early 1990s. Telecommunications. I don't understand how we can say it's only been within the last 8 years. And how do you suggest?
How does our speaker suggest?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Speaker, how do you suggest we get manufacturers to bring back the jobs when they don't? The cost of the labor in third world countries is so much cheaper than what the citizens of the United States requires.
To our speaker.
That's a great question that I don't quite understand, because your question is rather obvious that
the questioner's question, the lady's question.
Okay, yes. How can we possibly, certainly things have to be shipped, so there's a shipping cost that's considered. These questions and this kind of data, I don't have an expertise in. But it has been in the news recently that Apple has announced that they will be manufacturing in Detroit. They will open up a headquarters in Houston. It's obvious to me that that wouldn't have happened if Kamala Harris didn't get elected. And to the questioner's question, I don't understand. And if I could speak, I can only speak for myself. But if I could speak on behalf of Trump voters, I don't think 99% understand. And it is a bit of a leap of faith to put faith in a reality TV star that he's going to make that happen. But also, there's an implicit understanding that a nation can't really function if it's completely reliant on exported goods or imported goods. There does need to be a balance within a local economy.
Thank you to our speaker. Before I take another question, I do want to acknowledge that I called the current speaker a negative. This is, of course, an affirmative speech, just in case anyone caught me there. I do like to stay on top of that. For another question for our speaker, let's go to Mike.
Yes. Hi, Madam Chair. I'm interested in whether the speaker believes that if a president believes that he's doing good for the company, making the country great again, and perhaps even saving the country, does that give him license to violate the law and to override the checks and balances enshrined in the Constitution, as President Trump explicitly stated was the case last week? Thank you.
To our speaker.
Madam Chair, if I could ask the questioner to elaborate on where exactly such a violation occurred, that would be helpful. But to answer the questioner's question, we are ruled in this country not by men or women, but by laws. And the system of government that we have needs to be upheld with checks and balances and diffuse power and not tyrannical power. And I will acknowledge that a popular president could usurp some of the provisions in the Constitution. I personally, and I know many others, appreciate and value our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our division of government, and do not want to see it usurped at all. In the George W. Bush administration, there was a lot of executive orders that were being issued, and the Obama administration carried that same sort of pattern, which is quasi unconstitutional. We need to get back to where Congress declares war, where Congress controls spending, and the executive branch just administers the government. But I am curious to know where there was such violation in the news cycle recently, Madam Chair, and if it is permissible for the questioner to clarify that instance, I could comment further.
For now, I will smile upon anyone who wishes to make a speech to continue this thread rather than going back and forth in the questions of curiosity. So should anyone wish to do that, the questioner or anyone else, please reach out to your whip. So for that, with that, I will go on to another question of curiosity for the speaker. Let's go to Gary. Gary, you are muted.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate the speaker's emphasis upon the importance of the American people in the democratic system that we have determining through a majority vote who should be the president. My question is whether the speaker acknowledges that in 2020, in states that were dominated by Republican secretaries of state and the vote count was explored carefully by them, the result in that election was that Mr. Biden won that election. I want to know whether the speaker acknowledges that that occurred, and if it did, whether he can feel confident in Mr. Trump performing effectively as a constitutionally disciplined authority in our country by denying that he lost, by denying his loss in 2020. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for the question. To our speaker.
I don't think President Trump's views on our election systems, on election integrity, and on the 2020 election disqualify him from being able to follow the Constitution for the next 4 years. I will say that the responsibility for our elected officials in our local communities, in our states, in Congress, and in the presidency, the responsibility, they take an oath to defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States. And it is also incumbent upon us, the electorate, to hold them accountable to that oath that they swear. So that is why I was curious about the previous questioner's question about where there was such a violation of the Constitution, because as someone who does support President Trump, I want to be at the lead of holding him and his administration and the Congress, Republican, Democrat, and whomever, accountable to the Constitution. The 2020 election, it has been a wedge that has divided a lot of us. And I'm in New York State, and there's a motto that gets thrown around out here kind of tauntingly. It said Democrats like to say vote early and vote often, because we don't have a voter ID requirement for when you go to vote. So in theory, as long as you can master someone's signature, you could vote as many times as you want. There are a lot of flaws and holes in our election system, and we have to work hard to straighten that out. We are far behind many other countries in our election integrity, and there are a lot of steps we can take in 2025 to make sure that we get there. And it's productive if we talk about what measures actually make sense for doing that and encourage civic involvement for people at a local level to make sure their elections are upheld. Just because someone is the Secretary of State in an individual state, regardless of they're in the same party or a different party, doesn't mean that they are certifying elections that are 100% free of fraudulent activity. From my perspective and the perspective of a lot of Trump supporters, it's just another illustration of how powerful
Joseph.
How powerful Donald Trump's enemies are and the resistance that was put up against him. And we have seen a first Trump administration, and we have seen a Biden administration that was a refutation of Trump's policies, which have brought us to the present day, where the voters have decided that the Make America Great Again policies are what serves the best interests of this country, this Constitution, and future generations, and humanity and civilizations throughout the world, because America and our Bill of Rights and our Constitution has had a tremendous impact on freedom and prosperity throughout the world.
Joseph, last thought. Thank you. Okay. We will now go on to our next speaker, actually in the negative, thanking our speaker and our questioners. We're moving on to Carolyn. Carolyn, please unmute. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, Trump is not making America great again. To the contrary, since his inauguration, there has been a steady progression downward, undermining America's freedom, America's economy, America's standing in the world, and most importantly, America's values. The measure of a great country is not the power of its military or the strength of its economy, although our military and economy are both foundationally strong. In fact, our economy has been the strongest in the world for the last 3 years under Joe Biden. The true measure of a country is how it treats its people and people around the world. America has always been recognized as the shining beacon of light. We are a country that affords freedom and opportunity. In our lifetimes, whether we have agreed with the policies of our presidents or not, we have almost always been reasonably sure that they were people of integrity and honesty. Trump has stripped the presidency of those qualities. He thrives on appointing the least qualified and most aggressively contrarian people to government positions. Is there a universe where Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth are the best and the brightest? Or RFK Jr., who opposes vaccines even as measles is spreading like wildfire in Texas among the unvaccinated? America has always prided itself on being a haven for the rule of law, but this president believes that the art of the deal requires dishonesty and disingenuous dealing. He accuses his opponents of breaking the law while encouraging his minions to break the law in his name and pardoning them when they get caught. Already 2 of his J6 Proud Boys have been rearrested for violent acts. These are the hostage heroes of Donald Trump. Trump, yesterday at the United Nations, voted with Russia and the world's dictatorships and against Ukraine and all of our allies, violating everything America stands for. When you vote with the bad guys, that makes you a bad guy. Yesterday, our country became one of the bad guys. And Donald Trump is the mobster in chief. There is no other way to spin it. No, Trump has not made America great again. He is stripping the country of all that is great. And because of that, he is making all of us ashamed of the United States of America. And we cannot forgive him for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you to our speaker. Now for questions, I will go to Robert Smith. Robert. Robert, you want to unmute yourself?
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would, madam, whatever you call you. I'm
Madam
curious
Chair.
about whether the speaker really would like to address the changes that were promised are needed rather than, well, just that. Does she believe the changes that Trump promised and his administration promised are ones that are needed, or does she reject those changes?
Thank you for the question. Returning to the basic resolution to our speaker.
Trump made a lot of promises and said a lot of lies. There's no question, there's nobody who will disagree that changes are needed in our government. His methods need a lot of help, though, and I'll leave it at that.
For another question, let's go to Jack.
Thank you, Madam. I have a question for the speaker. The simple question is, do you agree with anything that Trump is doing right now, or any?
Does she agree with?
Does she agree with? Yes, thank you.
I don't agree with any of his methods whatsoever.
Very clear answer.
What about his policies? The question was for the speaker was, do you agree with any of the policies?
Again, what I said to answer the first question was everybody would agree that changes need to be made. And we certainly don't want to have waste and fraud, but there's been no evidence of fraud, and his methods are madness.
And for one final question for the speaker, let's go to Cheryl.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question for the speaker. If back when Bill Clinton was president, if she was in favor when he cut hundreds of thousands of jobs to eventually balance the budget in his 4th year of federal jobs.
To our speaker.
I think that has nothing to do with our debate tonight. I'm not going to answer that.
We will allow speakers to pass on questions should they have nothing to say. So with that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked. We will now return to the affirmative for a speech. Let's go to Paul.
Yeah, thank you. This may end up being fairly brief, but so in 1981, I went from a U.S. government job to go to work at Apple. And, you know, if you want to talk about a different culture, what a different culture that was. And, you know, I see Apple as being somewhat relevant with Elon Musk, you know, similar kind of management. And later I was involved in a really major HHS project to create a piece of software, which was pretty much a total failure, government software. Just the kind of thing government doesn't know how to do. But so I know something about both cultures. And I think, you know, in the federal workforce, there's an enormous amount of complacency. You know, maybe not in every single agency, but there really is an attitude, you know, that I got this government job, I'm going to be totally secure for life, and I don't really have to work very hard, is a lot of government jobs. Trump has a history of dealing with big issues that everybody else has been sweeping under the rug. He did that with China, and I think now he's doing that with the national debt and the size of government, which I think is quite simply not sustainable the way we're going on. And I think his partnership with Elon Musk is possibly an incredibly good thing. Elon Musk has a history of success where government fails. He actually created an electric car that people wanted to buy and found exciting. And he created a system. I had an experience once. A fellow Braver Angel and I were going to give a speech in a town that's about 200 miles away. I drove my Tesla. He drove his electric car. I think it was a Chevy Volt. Well, I had to stop and recharge, and it took me like 5 or 10 minutes. He spent the whole evening trying to find someplace where he could get enough of a charge to make that car actually work. So Elon understands systems. He understands how to do things. SpaceX is another tremendous example, a success where government has failed, you know, government has failed. So again, you know, but the national debt, I mean, you know, the Tea Party brought this up, and it just turned out that politically, the American people don't seem to be generally willing to look at and deal with this issue. So I think maybe Trump has actually found a way to do it. And, you know, I guess I'll just say that, you know, in real life, you cannot afford everything you want, and you can't afford everything that's good. And our imagining that we can do that is hubris that I believe will lead to our downfall if not dealt with. And it looks like Trump is dealing with it. And with that, it looks like I've come in at about 3 minutes, 3:50.
Thank you to our speaker. Now for questions of curiosity. Let's go to Catherine.
Hello, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious to ask the speaker who spoke positively about Elon Musk in his role. I'm wondering whether the speaker has any concerns about Musk getting such access to all of the data without going through the typical type of security clearance that would be required for that level of access? Thank you.
No, I don't have any concerns about that. I have a tremendous amount of faith in Elon Musk, and I actually believe that Musk, rich as he is, actually wants to do good rather than just make a lot of money. So I believe that for him, money is a tool to be able to do good.
Let's go to Nils for a question.
Hi, Madam Chair. I actually forgot the question I was going to ask when I raised my hand, but let me see if I can recall it quickly.
Okay.
Here's the question. So the speaker was expressing faith that Donald Trump would be able to effectively deal with the deficit and the debt. So I'm asking the speaker if they really genuinely, truly believe that there are, and right now, just as a point of fact, maybe we can agree on, the current deficit is somewhere around $1.8 trillion in our budget. So I'm wondering, does the speaker believe that there is actually $1.8 trillion of fraud and abuse and waste that can be identified and eliminated? And also, does he agree that if there is such waste and fraud that can be eliminated, that it has to be done by Congress? It cannot be done by the president or Elon Musk by fiat. Does he agree with that?
Thank you. To our speaker.
So let's not confuse the deficit and the debt, which are two separate things. The debt is horrendous. The deficit is also incredibly problematic. Assuming, and I don't remember what the exact number is, but assuming that there is $1.8 billion of deficit, I believe that there has to be $1.8 billion.
Trillion, sorry, Paul, it's trillion.
Sorry, yeah, orders of magnitude. Billions and billions, after a while, you're talking about real money. I believe that there is that amount of spending that we cannot afford. And again, as I said at the end, in real life, you can't afford everything you want, and you can't afford everything that's good. You can afford what you can afford, and we're way, way beyond that. So, yeah, I believe that there is that amount of either fraud, abuse, or unnecessary spending.
Madam Chair, could the speaker also address the second part?
I'm not going to, the second part of the question?
Yes, does he believe that Congress is able to make the changes to eliminate that waste and fraud?
If the executive branch has to do it, and Congress seems to be incapable of doing it, I'm good with that.
All right. And with that, our speaker and questioners are thanked. I see a lot of people signing up to give speeches, so we are going to move to 3-minute speeches and 2 questions per speaker. I see all your hands up. I apologize. I want you to give speeches. So reach out to your whip. We're going to get through as many as we can. So for our next speech, we are going to, actually, Elizabeth will get 4 minutes because that's the final pair for that. But Elizabeth, you are up to give a speech in the negative.
Thank you. Trump promised to stop the invasion at the southern border. In 2024, I had the honor of participating in a local Braver Angels Common Grounds workshop on immigration with residents from Virginia, DC, and Maryland. Some had immigrated from other countries. Our shared values included wanting a humanely maintained and secure border, safety of immigrants, U.S. citizens and residents, respect for diversity, commitment to our constitutional values, and more. However, I would like to add some words of wisdom from someone who did not attend the workshop, from someone who works closely with refugees on the ground in Mexico. His name is Marcos. For safety's sake, he didn't share his last name with the journalist. Marcos says that troops would not make a difference and that while stricter border policies cut into the business of human smuggling recently, it was only temporary. Organized crime will always find a way. I think, he said, Trump is focusing on the issue of migration the wrong way. Instead of closing the border, he should look farther south to implement measures against corrupt people in our countries, meaning Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, the Northern Triangle, among the smallest and poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, some of which we had a part in. I agree with him. Marcos, by the way, would know. He is a human smuggler, though he thinks of himself more like a travel agent. The problems we have at our southern border are a symptom of larger systemic problems. When we go to the doctor with a rash of measles, we learn the hard way that it would have been better to get the vaccination in the first place. This metaphor was chosen to serve a dual purpose. Migration from those countries stems from decades of insecurity, economic challenges, weak governance. There's an explosion in corruption during the pandemic. Presidential power expanded, it translated into an increase in migration numbers. There's no fast fix to that. So China is now the predominant leading partner in wealthier South American countries, but the US remains the Northern Triangle's lodestar, economically, politically, and culturally. So how do you promote accountable democracy there? Radical transparency that's robust, enforceable, convenient, and inexpensive access to public information. Civil society watchdogs and independent journalists could hold corrupt officials accountable, etc. But what corrupt person wants to be held accountable? The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is a US law that prohibits bribery of foreign officials and helps influence and corruption efforts and corporate compliance in countries including and beyond the Northern Triangle. Trump just repealed it. At this point, with all that's going on here with DOJ's lack of transparency, if we tried to reinstate the FCPA, it would be like the pot calling the kettle black. If I were a Northern Triangle ruler, I would just laugh in our face heartily. So he's leaving us with the only option, just boots on the ground on both sides of the fence. Having only one option is never a good situation. And now the second, ad astra. Trump promised to pursue our manifest destiny, to plant the stars and stripes on Mars. Right. Tell that to China. China's rapid advancements in space technology, like high-resolution remote sensing lasers and landing a craft on the far side of the moon, are raising concerns about their increasing defense capabilities. Deciding to go to Mars without a successful presence on the moon would be like deciding to drive to LA from DC with no rest stops and no gas stations in between. And plus, who preceded those manifest destiny settlers? Surveyors and cartographers. Who precedes US astronaut settlers on the lunar surface? China. China has surveyed the lunar surface and created the most detailed geological map of the moon to date. Aside from a conversation about the new Silk Road with access to all the necessary rare earth metals and resources, they will do the same on the moon. And before we get there, they could have control.
30 seconds.
They could have control of hydrogen for interplanetary fuel and more. We need to pay more attention not to Mars, but to Earth, low Earth orbit, and lunar threats first, or there will be no trip to Mars for US astronauts, much less little muskies.
Thank you to our speaker. Thought-provoking points that we haven't heard yet. So I would like to go to Catherine for a question.
Yes, I don't think I was asking a question for the speaker, but that's okay. I would like to ask if our speaker, Madam Chairman, if our speaker is aware that only the Congress has the power of the purse, and that only Congress has the power to establish or abolish agencies, and therefore it is illegal and unconstitutional for the executive branch to be doing that, and if she acknowledges that DOJ itself is an illegal agency because it was not created by Congress and it has someone who has accessed my data illegally.
I would like to answer that question only saying I am very uncomfortable with DOJ. That's an understatement, but it's not where I was coming from with my argument today, so I'm not prepared to answer the question. Okay, it's not my purview right now. Thank you.
Fair enough. Okay, one more question from Tom. Please keep the questions brief at this point.
We'll keep it brief. many presidents on both parties have created, I'm sorry, does the speaker acknowledge that many federal agencies have been created by executive orders rather than through congressional work? Second question, I agree with you, it is the Congress's job to
Agree with the
cut the
speaker.
federal government. However, the Congress for years has refused to do this. And I would assert that the American people are fed up with the do nothing, or the do minimalist Congress, and voted for Trump to take the extreme and sometimes legally questionable actions he is taking. And I will stop it there in the interest of letting other people speak.
Thank you. To our speaker.
I'm not sure how to answer
And
that
so
question.
when after we talked about everything,
Is there,
and we're gonna.
can we mute the background? Thank you so much. Okay, so we will now thank you to our speaker and our questioners. Going on to our next speaker, we are moving now to 3-minute speeches. Jack, over to you.
Okay, 3 minutes. I'm trying to do this here. I'll try to do it like in a New York minute, go rapid fire. A lot of great points. I just want to thank everybody on this call right now for coming. I think this is what brings Americans together. This is really what it means to be American, to have our differences, but to come together and support the process, right? Trust no person, no ruler, trust the process, the Constitution and checks and balances. So rapid fire, a lot of great points I just want to talk about. We talked about the southern border. I'm an immigrant. My wife's an immigrant. Let me tell you one thing. The U.S. does not have the right to go violate other countries' sovereignty and tell them how to do things and root out their corruption. There's a limit. We can encourage, we can reward. There's a limit to what we can do in other countries. So using that as a solution or a measure is not, is something we should reconsider. Regarding layoffs is the principal pillar of capitalism. And it's because of pillar that ability to lay off that attracts so much business here, makes our economy the #1 economy in the world. FYI, Wall Street, per Wall Street, 70% of the global capital is invested in the U.S. market from all around the world. It's because of our laws. And unemployment rate is record low, 4%. So yeah, it's terrible on an individual basis, but we need to rise above that, think systemically, to where we all will be better off. Tariffs are very powerful. And just the mere threat of tariffs are powerful motivators to where people can come in. And so you've seen a lot of investments come in, not just from Apple, but from foreign countries as well. They know if you're a company about to build a plant, you're going to think twice about doing it where it's a little cheaper. That's the purpose. That's why Trump is got elected. He has the people behind him. We don't like his style. We don't like his manners and his tact. Granted, all of that could be so much better. But the policies, the actual, someone controlling the border, that is not immigration. The front door, vetted, where you're matched to a job and the economic needs, immediately contributing to both country and yourself, that's immigration. What's happening on the border, rewarding fence jumpers with 6 years of wait list and hotel cards, and that is the reason why we have the problems we have. And lastly, what did I say here? I think I covered it. Violations of the Constitution. I'll say this. No one brought this up. The 14th Amendment. Let everybody be clear. We're in for a show with the 14th Amendment. It is intentionally written to not be universal birthright citizenship. It was intentional. And there's a lot of cases that go both ways. It's going to be complicated. There's merit on both sides. It's for the Supreme Court to decide. There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and drama being put out there by the media. We need to rise above that, inoculate ourselves to the misinformation, knowing that people are getting paid to get us all agitated. We need to take a deep breath, look for the merit on both sides, and remember what makes us all American, what makes us all here today, right now. That's perfect closure. I'll leave it there.
Thank you to our speaker. Let's go to Tammy and then Bill for our 2 questions.
Thank you to the Madam Chair. Promises were made by the Trump administration that many of us agree with. For example, getting illegal immigration under control, ending the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, and helping middle-class families thrive better in our economy. And I think that those of us who didn't vote for him felt like, or many of us felt like, hey, we all want those things. Let's see what we can do. But I think what's throwing the country in a tailspin is the ways in which that's happening. So, for example, broad swaths of seemingly
Let's
indiscriminate
come to a question.
cuts. Well, okay, so, the speaker mentioned corporations reorganizing in this way. They would do that carefully and with regard to what, how the business will function after the cuts. And so my question is, does the speaker feel that the people who voted for Trump are comfortable with the manner in which these changes are being implemented?
Was that to me? The question to was that?
Yes.
I would say, again, the manner leaves a lot to be desired. But what we need to understand is when we eliminate entire departments, like the Department of Education, sounds wanton and crazy, but the truth is there's a questioning. Hey, we didn't always have a Board of Education. It was created in 1950 something. So, how do we function before? How can we function after? Do we still want it? It's the questioning of the entire purpose of that organization. It's not that these organizations don't do anything good for us. It's a matter of us not being able to afford it. We have a $2 trillion annual deficit, plus a mountain of debt that our children are inheriting. So we have to make cuts somewhere. And there's are no bad programs. We have to cut whatever we can. That's not vital organs. That's how desperate the situation is. And we should be questioning entire departments if need be.
And now to Bill for a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question of curiosity was specific to this speaker's comments about the 14th Amendment, which in my reading of the 14th Amendment is quite clear and direct about establishing birthright citizenship. The speaker suggested that it's a misinterpretation to think that it is intended to provide birthright citizenship. So I was hoping the speaker could elaborate why they believe it's a misrepresentation to think that it ensures birthright citizenship and should be overturned by executive order. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, that's a great question. That's gonna be a hot topic. Everyone here should be an expert in this topic in the next 6 months to a year. It should be all over the news. The truth is, when it was first created, universal was not there. It was jurisdiction. It was subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. It was carefully worded that way because they wanted to exclude. They wanted to create birthright citizenship for Black slaves. At the time when it was written, that was the purpose, but not to Indians and Indian reservations. They intentionally wanted to omit certain people. That's why universal birthright citizenship was intentionally omitted. There's been a series of lawsuits afterwards with different nuances that swung both ways. And it was clear that, no, it's not meant to be universal. Then we have the precedent of what we've just been doing anyway, just giving it away for the last 50 so 100 years. That creates a little bit of a precedent in of itself. So now it's down to the Supreme Court. There's merit on both sides, and it's key to look at the Supreme Court cases after that amendment was passed to really understand the gist, why it is the way it is, and why we have a controversy that has to be settled at the Supreme Court level. And we're all going to learn a lot about our country, and most importantly, we should all be asking, okay, it is what it is. But what should it be going forward? I think that's what's missing. I think that's where, as Americans, we come together and should be focusing on, okay, what, this is 2025. What's the best for this country today?
With that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked. We now will go to another 3-minute speech in the negative. Let's go to Catherine. Back on deck. Catherine for a speech. Catherine Merrick, to be specific.
Oh,
Another Catherine.
okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry. Yes, I would like to ask the question about. I would like to state that in the negative, I mentioned a little earlier that I do find that there is both unconstitutionality in terms of the division of the branches of government. If Congress is designated as having the power of the purse, I don't think that automatically means that the executive can take it over if they don't think Congress is doing their job. And I think that Trump, as the executive, he is not even the one who is making the decisions He has farmed that out to Elon Musk and Doge, which I still think is an illegal or an unconstitutional agency because it was not created by Congress. But in addition to the unconstitutionality, I'm concerned with the illegality of what Donald Trump has done in his first month. I think that he has shown that he has no respect for the rule of law. He has released convicts who were recently convicted and jailed for specific offenses on January 6th. He has also dismissed charges against Eric Adams, who there have been numerous resignations over that because there were obviously things that were valid charges against him, and those were released in a quid pro quo because he was going to help Trump to enforce the what am I trying to say, the deportations, and those are clearly illegal to do that. And in addition, perhaps it's not illegal, but I think that disregarding 80 years of world order that was established after 1945 without any type of apology and just outright lying about that Russia did not start the Ukraine war and not supporting democracy as we have for the last 80 years. This is just a disregarding of who we are as Americans in the last 80 years. I mean, I feel my father fought in World War II. I feel like he's spitting on my father's grave. So that's my speech.
Thank you to our speaker. Questions of curiosity for our speaker. I see one from Tom. If we only have one. Tom?
For the speaker, I would just point out that the executive is authorized to create agencies. USAID was created by President Kennedy through an executive order. And while I'm furious about voting with Russia at the UN, I would recognize that 80 years ago, when we started creating NATO, the US was the only functioning great economy in the world. Today,
Tom, bringing this to a question, please.
Does the speaker recognize that the economic system and realities are very different today from what was needed 80 years ago?
Yes, I do recognize that. Although, as I understand it, our foreign aid and our defense of democracies, need for foreign aid is a very small part of our budget. I think it's less than 10%, if even that. And also it's the rule, it's the world order that we have come to recognize as what America stands for. And I think at least that the people of America should be able to weigh in on that before it is just thrown out as if it never existed. And I think that's what we saw yesterday in the UN and what Trump has done by his out and out lie of who started the Ukraine war.
And one more question from Tom Dagnan.
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 Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Madam Chair, am I allowed to ask the last question asker a question rather than
Only our speaker. Only our speaker, I'm afraid. Do you wish to pass the question then?
I'll pass the question.
Okay. For our final question, we will go to Ryan.
Regarding the speaker, I'm curious, do you remember the seizure of the Crimea by Russia in 2014? And do you know why that happened?
Yes, I know that Putin considered Crimea as part of Russia, and I know that it didn't become part of Ukraine until Khrushchev actually gave it to Ukraine. I know that, but it was part of sovereign Ukraine. And that is why Putin felt he had the right to seize it, and why he felt he had the right to go into Ukraine to go after more land that he thought belonged to Russia and to the former Soviet Union. He was a KGB agent after all. And I think he's not to be trusted.
With that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked. I'm now looking for a 3-minute speech in the affirmative. Let's go to Jet.
Okay. I support implementing Donald Trump's promises. He made so many promises, but let me just state my top 3 promises he made and why I support these policies. Number 1, fix the border issue. Well, we are a country of law and order. Therefore, we should control our borders and follow the law. I'm an immigrant. I immigrated from South Korea, but legally. I believe in immigration. We are a country of immigrants, but I believe that immigration process should be carried out legally and orderly. Number 2, second promise he made was to end DEI and work policies. Well, I believe in DEI, but the letter E in DEI should stand for equal opportunity, not equal outcome. If we want to continue to lead the world and make the America great again, then we need to let the best of the best rise to the top. Therefore, I am against the DEI. Personally, I prefer MEI, meritocracy, excellence, and intelligence to make the America great again. Number 3, the third promise he made was to keep us out of war. Well, I am a Vietnam War veteran. I served my country, but I strongly believe that we should do whatever we can to avoid going into the war. How can anyone go against that? Although I do not totally agree with Donald Trump's approach to implementing these policies, in practical terms, I fully support implementing his policies. Thank you.
Thank you to our speaker. And for a question of curiosity, let's go to Kester.
Yes, Madam Chair, does the speaker acknowledge that a bipartisan bill to fix the border was voted on, it was put together, and Trump stepped in to tell his followers to turn it down so that he would have a position, have something to argue about in the election. So the bill was not passed, even though it was a bipartisan bill. Thank you.
What does our speaker think about that?
Well, I don't know the details of so-called bipartisan bill, but I'm talking about his promises. He said he wants to fix the border and make it legal. That's what I'm supporting.
That is the resolution on the table. So with that, one more question. Let's go to Craig. Have not heard from Craig yet tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to ask the speaker, first I'd say that I agree with the speaker that immigration should be legal and not illegal. I agree with that. I'd like to ask the speaker what he thinks about the role of deportation and what the speaker feels about what Trump's deportation policy and implementation should be.
Well, you want me to respond, Madam Chair?
Yes, yep, that's yours to respond to.
Oh, well, law and order, that's what we are. If somebody's come here illegally, then we have to follow the law. They should be deported. It should be done legally. It's that simple. law and order. That's what we are, and that's what we should be.
With that, our speaker and questioners are thanked. We'll now move on to a 3-minute speech in the negative from Bill.
Thank you,
Bill
Madam
Woodson.
Chair. Just to refresh our memory, the point is that to resolve that America needs the changes Trump and his administration promise. I acknowledge, Madam Chair, that there's significant merit in those stated goals to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse, to reduce and eliminate the deficit, to secure the safety of the American people by positioning our military to be cutting edge in their effectiveness and lethality, and to enhance our standing as a respected world leader. But the actions of this current administration, in fact, undercut each of those stated goals. By cutting the budget of the IRS, you're reducing your ability to generate revenues that would then support reducing the deficit. You get a return of dollars on the pennies for every cent you invest in the IRS. By deporting all undocumented persons, over 11 million by best estimate, is a project that would cost our country billions of dollars to implement, while at the same time causing devastating labor shortages in a number of key sectors, including agriculture and health services. To impose tariffs will dramatically increase the cost of consumer and industrial goods. It'll disrupt supply chains. It'll spark retaliatory tariffs, which will damage our industries, our agriculture, other important sectors. By dismissing the inspectors general, whose role is to manage and identify fraud, waste, and abuse, by focusing on eliminating DEI and targeting support for the trans community that participates in the military will actually decrease the effectiveness of our military. By withdrawing support for Ukraine and extorting Ukraine for mineral rights, also by threatening tariffs and making statements such as forcibly taking over our allies like Canada, Greenland, Panama. These destabilize key allies and partnerships. They degrade NATO while increasing the cost of goods for Americans, legitimizing the military aggressions of Russia and China, and by promoting policies that reward the military aggressions of Russia, offering to remove sanctions, refusing to condemn their invasion of Ukraine. These actions destabilize Europe, increase the likelihood of further Russian aggression against its neighbors, and those circumstances would adversely impact the quality of life for Americans. It would increase uncertainty in the world. It'll increase the cost of goods for us and for others. It destabilizes the world order, the norms that we once promoted, that borders should not be moved through military force or coercion. So each of these actions are actually going to go contrary to the stated goals of reducing waste, improving efficiency, improving our effectiveness, improving our safety, improving our quality of life. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you to our speaker. For a question of curiosity, let's go to Tom Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the speaker, does the speaker think the number of, or not the number, but the millions of illegal immigrants that the Biden administration invited in, flew into this country, invited in, facilitated through NGOs, did it add millions of dollars to our budget or billions of dollars to our budget to take care of them?
Madam Chair, the suggestion that the prior administration invites illegal immigration is specious. It's a talking point that's not factual. There are processes that allow for immigrants who believe that they are actually in fear of their lives to present themselves at our border. When people are presenting themselves as their border as refugees or in fear of their lives, that's actually following a legal process. That is not an illegal process. The most people who are here illegally are visa overstays. And so the kinds of actions that have been proposed to deport these people, it actually first penalizes people who followed the established protocols. And so, and to the costs, obviously there are costs of resettlement. And obviously the people who come and whether they're documented or not and are working, they're paying taxes. It's impossible to work and get a paycheck without paying taxes on that paycheck. One of the interesting things about immigration And people who
Last thought.
this document, they have actually they're paying into Social Security benefits that they can never realize. That's actually helping to keep Social Security afloat. So there's actually a net positive to that activity. Thank you.
Thank you to our speaker again and to our questioner. In the interest of time, I want to get a couple more speeches in, so I'm going to move on to our next speaker in the affirmative, and we will have one more speech in the negative. I am very grateful for all of you participating in good faith tonight. I know we will not get to everyone, so we will be discussing more of this going forward, rest assured. So for now, for our final speech in the affirmative tonight, we'll go to the previous questioner, Tom Cook. You have only 2 minutes. Tom?
Sorry.
No worries.
Hey, so yeah, I am so excited about this administration, in favor of everything they have done. I wish the deportations would increase. I'm glad they pardoned all the J6ers. I wish they would have pardoned all of them. They commuted some of the sentences. And I am looking forward to the blinders getting put back on our justice system, so that we don't have a two-tier justice in our country. And one thing I'm really excited about is because of the abuse of our justice system against our citizens, specifically the J6ers, there are now thousands of advocates for reform to our abusive prison system and prosecution system in this country. People that have been in the system for 10, 20 years now have thousands of advocates to help get them out of it for crimes they many of them did not commit. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to see us pull out of wars and bring our troops home.
With that, our speaker is thanked. And for one question, let's go to Lisa. I've seen you raise your hand many times and I haven't called on you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions for the speaker.
If you could pick just one.
Oh, if I could pick just one. Okay. I love his enthusiasm. And I wonder if he is aware on the deportations that in the first month of Trump's administration, 37,660 people were deported. In an average month in the United States, we deport 57,000 people. And but I love your enthusiasm. I love his enthusiasm. I'm just curious if the speaker understands it doesn't flesh out just quite like that.
What does the speaker think about that?
I think the sanctuary cities are getting ready to be sued, and I hope people get put in jail for interfering with ICE. I hope it goes up to 100,000. It's going to be very painful for this country to see it happen, but it needs to happen because we've sat on this subject for far too long.
And with that, our speaker and questioner are thanked. And we move on now to our final speech of the night in the negative. We're going to Mike Sinuta.
Yes, hello, Madam Speaker.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, I'll go quick. Change is definitely sorely needed in many areas. We're not on a sustainable path. Most Americans agree with this. Trump has demonstrated an extraordinary populist ability to tap into these legitimate concerns and fears of many Americans to convince them that he can fix our problems. Many smart, decent people hungry for this change, genuinely concerned for our country's future, have put nearly unconditional faith in his ability to do so. Unfortunately, he remains the guy who had to pay $25 million to people he defrauded with Trump University, and he bankrupted multiple casinos. The reality is he's had a long history of fraud, and the Trump administration is not remotely credible, competent, or trustworthy as a change agent. In his first month of office, rather than clear, well thought out promises capably pursued in a sober, responsible, well-planned and communicated manner, we're seeing impulsive, haphazard, incompetent, at times unquestionably lawful executive action with insufficient, if any, oversight from Congress. Last week, he quoted Napoleon in declaring that he is above the law. The true debate is less about the specific changes promised, more about the acute crisis that Trump's election and his administration's actions and words so far, along with the total capitulation of the Senate GOP and their failure to exercise their checks and balances, in particular in their role to advise and consent on key nominations, represents to our nation. No constructive, sustainable, unifying change is possible under this wholly corrupt and reckless administration. That's not his objective, and he's incapable of leading and delivering the change we need. These are legitimate. There are legitimate and important debates to be had, and we had some of them tonight, about the changes that are needed and about specific policies. Debating the merits of specific changes at this point is like debating what color to paint the living room while the house is on fire. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry I had to go so fast. Maybe you heard every other word. Sorry.
You fit exactly into the time. And for our final question of the night, Herb.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would like to ask the Speaker if he agrees with the fact that what we have spoken about tonight is the word change came up quite frequently, and people were voting for change. And maybe it's a semantic issue, but don't you think what change, people say change, they mean improvement. And I think what we're not seeing is improvement, while we are seeing change in all the actions that have been taken at this time. And maybe we need to look at that word and be more clear on that definition of that word, because we can always get change. How do we get?
You are Speaker? What does
Speaker,
the Speaker think?
I agree. Change and improvement are two very different things.
And with that, our Speaker and questioners are thanked. All of our speakers and questioners tonight.